One of President Trump's most potent economic weapons is in the crosshairs of a Supreme Court ruling that could come as soon as next month.
Trump's sweeping tariff strategy is at risk of being struck down by the justices, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warning that the financial implications are one thing, but the national security implications are something else entirely. Watch.
Well, I don't think it's against the administration. I actually think it's against the American people. And it will be, again, as I said, it will be a hit to national security. And the revenues aren't the focus here. The revenues aren't the focus. The revenues can be replaced, but all the things that President Trump has been able to do using tariffs on the national security side will be jeopardized.
Joining us now, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett. Well, that's certainly what the Solicitor General was arguing in front of the Supreme Court, that it's not about the revenue. Don't call it a tax, because that's not. Of course, he didn't sound like that in front of the Supreme Court. I listened to all the arguments, but that was the essence of the argument that he was making in front of the high court. But how do you, it's hard, it was hard to ascertain how they might rule, even listening to Justice Gorsuch.
Yeah, and the Solicitor General, I listened as well. He didn't have your Southern accent, but he got boxed into a corner on taxes versus tariffs. Look, if the high court decides that the tariffs really are taxes, well, that's a constitutional power only Congress can levy. On the other hand, Congress did delegate substantial authority to the president to regulate trade and foreign commerce under emergency powers. So the question becomes, was this an emergency? So that's the debate the justices are likely having among themselves. Let's say, for the sake of argument, they do strike down some or all of Trump's tariffs. Well, the president can still invoke other federal trade laws to impose the equivalent of the tariffs. Import duties, license fees, restrictions on certain imports. And in fact, he has about 2 or 3 statutes to choose from that give him similar authority to accomplish the same tariff goals. It doesn't matter what he does, he'll get sued all over again, because that's what his adversaries do. If the guy sneezes, they sue.
Now, Bessent said it's not about the revenues, but what about the revenues? How the heck are they supposed to turn back all this money? How many parties are going to come in to play here and say, wait a minute, I gave a little bit here, I gave a little bit there, I had to spend more money on selling what I'm selling because of the tariffs if you go down the line?
Well, there are several ways, if I were Trump, to go about that. It depends on whether the Supreme Court decides this retroactively or not. But as I say, there are other statutes, trade acts in the 1930s and the 1970s that allow them to do the exact same thing. So I would defer the refunds and impose those new provisions of the various statutes to avoid a refund entirely.
There are other cases that that the Supreme Court, Greg, is going to hear, from birthright citizenship to the issue of, can biological boys participate in girls' sports? There is and it's Becky Pepper Jackson, I think, is the little boy's name, but is a young girl. It involves West Virginia. There is a stacked docket in front of the high court.
Yeah, there really is. And I would put at the top of the list, beyond tariffs, the birthright citizenship. 2 days after Trump took office and he issued the executive order on that, I wrote a column that said Trump has a valid argument in denying automatic birthright citizenship to U.S.-born children of parents here illegally. And I wrote that because I delved into what the sponsors of the 14th Amendment said when they wrote that amendment. They never intended for it to apply to people who came here to the U.S. by breaking the law. So they wrote the provision subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They wrote it in the amendment. What does it mean? It means allegiance to the U.S. So the mere act of setting foot on American soil, that doesn't create allegiance. And in fact, during the debate, 1866, that's what the lawmakers said. You know, the proponents of birthright citizenship have long pointed to the Supreme Court decision called U.S. versus Wong. But the parents in that case were here lawfully and permanently. And there are a couple of other Supreme Court cases that say that children of illegals should be excluded from citizenship. So Trump can actually win this case. We'll wait and see.
By the way, would it be retroactive to the people who've already been granted their birthright citizenship, or would it just be going forward?
Unclear. I mean, I'll be interested in hearing that addressed during the oral arguments.
Gregg Jarrett, great to see you, my friend. Thank you very much.